Merry Christmas, everyone, and welcome to the December 6th edition of The Truth. I'm John Gordon. We have a good show for you today. We've got an interview coming up with Cleta Mitchell. She works for the Conservative Partnership Institute, and her specialty is elections integrity. I loved our time with Cleta. She is a very smart person and has been extremely dedicated to this cause, and at a very steep personal price, I might add. You can find out all about it in our interview to come up very shortly. We are also speaking to father and son, Humberto and David Cancio. They have jointly authored a book called Gabriel Lock, Bound by Law. It is fiction, but it is inspired by Humberto Cancio's work as an attorney in Miami for the last 35 years. He encountered some very interesting people along the way. He is a Cuban refugee and established himself as a successful lawyer in South Florida. I was personally inspired by his story, and I just thought it was really cool that he and his son authored this book together. We're coming to you today on the John Fredericks Media Network, 9 cities, 24 AM and FM radio stations up and down the East Coast. And let's just take a quick snippet of the weather in each of these cities. I'll just start out by telling you that in West Palm Beach, it's 84 degrees, and that's going to be the high today. And Atlanta will have a high of 49. Norfolk is going to get all the way up to 46 today. Pittsburgh 31, Richmond 35, Nashville 39, and Philadelphia 32. And so it's really cold up and down the East Coast. So just stay warm, build a fire, get next to the radio, and come listen to us. We also live stream all across the web on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, X, and Getter. In fact, you can go to Getter right now or Rumble right now, any of those outlets actually, and watch the live stream. And I hope if you enjoy it that you will honor us by subscribing to our channel. It really does help us a lot. We also take this broadcast and put it out as 3 separate podcasts each week, and you can hear those on Spotify, iHeart Podcast, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music. You can also follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, Getter, and Truth Social. And of course, all of our past episodes are on johngordon.tv. We also distribute our broadcast to cdm.press and their 13 digital platforms, as long as their social media live streams as well. The program is growing and has grown. We hope to continue to grow. It cannot happen without you. So feel free to subscribe, like, and share our broadcast as you deem fit. Anything you can do would be appreciated. It does very much help us attract a broader audience. Well, President Trump has been on the hot seat this week about the bombing of a drug boat off the coast of Venezuela in international waters. The reason that it is controversial is that the military struck the drug boat, incapacitated it, but then decided to take a second crack at it because some of the people on the boat had survived the blast. Here's what President Trump had to say in response.
Mr. President, in the boat strikes, if it is found that survivors were actually killed while clinging onto that boat, should Secretary Hegseth, Admiral Bradley, or others be punished?
I think you're going to find that this is war, that these people were killing our people by the millions, actually, if you look over a few years. I think last year we lost close to 300,000 people were killed. That's not mentioning all the families. Have you seen what happens with the families of not only the people killed, the people that are trying to get their son or their daughter off of this poison that they've been fed? I think you're going to find that there's a very receptive ear to doing exactly what they're doing, taking out those boats. And very soon we're going to start doing it on land too, because we know every route, we know every house, we know where they manufacture this crap, we know where they put it all together. And I think you're going to see it very soon on land also. Yeah, please.
So to be clear, you support the decision to kill survivors after the initial
No, I
strike?
support the decision to knock out the boats. And whoever's piloting those boats, most of them are gone. But whoever are piloting those boats, they're guilty of trying to kill people in our country. Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I agree with the president on this. Well, I'm sure I don't, actually. I mean, if you want to incapacitate the boats and destroy the drugs, that's one thing. But killing people on the boat without due process has been a problem for me. But I suspect that it's actually not really about the drugs. Venezuela supplies 5 to 15% of the drugs that come into the United States. I don't think the drugs on those boats are coming to the United States. You couldn't make it across the Gulf of America without refueling, and I have not seen any gas pumps in the middle of the Gulf. So the logic doesn't really add up to me. If we wanted to declare war on drugs, then we would go to Mexico, which supplies 85 to 90% of the drugs coming into the United States. So I don't know why we are justifying our actions in Venezuela on drugs. It is a convenient reason, but I'm not sure that it is the main reason. You know that Venezuela is the richest company in South America. They've got drugs and oil. And they're in bed with Iran and the Chinese. I suspect that has more to do with President Trump's motivation than the drugs. And Maduro is a bad guy. He is a drug lord, basically, and facilitates the manufacture and exportation of these drugs. And that does give us justification for going into Venezuela, just like we did Panama a number of years ago. But the way that we do it, I think, does have to be measured. And I think that he was evasive in his answers, I felt like. So, you know, every time I end up disagreeing with Trump, I seem to come back later saying, oh, I'm sorry, I actually didn't know X, Y, or Z, that is later filled in the blank. And at this point, through 5 years of Trump presidencies, I've kind of gotten to the point where I just trust him. You know, I think it on some level, maybe we just say, I don't like it. It's a tough job that he has to do, but I'm going to trust the fact that I know that he is operating in what he believes, and the military and the State Department. I mean, these decisions are not made by Trump alone in his private quarters at midnight while he is reading or contemplating. It is done in consultation with Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, and with Marco Rubio, the head of the State Department, and many layers of analysts below each of them. So I'm sure they've got really good data. I'm sure that they have concluded that Venezuela is a national security threat to our country because of its coziness with Iran and China. And also, the president is right. We have to stop the influx of drugs into this country, especially fentanyl, which we know is deadly. It has got to be stopped. So these are extraordinary times requiring extraordinary measures. I don't like it, but you know what? Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do based on the hand that you've been dealt. And I kind of get the sense that that's what is happening right now. If Mexico was in bed with Iran and the Chinese, maybe you'd see people be getting blown up off the coast of Mexico. We haven't seen that yet. Maybe we will before it's all said and done. But I wonder if you've been following what has been happening in Minnesota. You know, Tim Walz is embroiled in a scandal where the Somalis have taken money from state grants that have actually been channeling grants from the federal government, and they've gotten back into the hands of the politicians. And Tim Walz is having to defend that. Minnesota is an interesting place to me. It's in the heartland of America. It's Midwest. If you look at the other Midwestern states, they're all red, and they're very religious, and they're very patriotic. Minnesota seems to be an outlier. 15% of the population is comprised of Somalis. You reckon there's a coincidence there, or a cause and effect? Well, it's gotten bad enough that Mike Lindell is going to come in and save it. And Mike Lindell is coming to the rescue. Here's what he had to say earlier this week.
Minnesota was the tip of the spear for many things, and I believe we're also a Trojan horse for a lot of evil that's sitting here. And a lot of states can say, "Oh no, it's us. Oh no, it's us." Well, Minnesota, there's a lot of stuff that would take me a long time to tell everybody. There's a lot of bad things going on here, and I, for myself, I thought about it. It's like I don't know who else. Number one, I don't know anyone else that can win. We've done polling. And I know what needs to be done here. I've lived here all my life. I know what the stuff I did when I came out of addiction, all the stuff we did downtown, helping out Teen Challenge, the Salvation Army, Union Gospel, all these people in the streets that I was helping down there and that we were doing, all that just was thrown out the window by this governor that we have now in this administration. And it's pretty, the nonsensical things, him running for vice president. I mean, now the whole country knows. It's like, you can't make this stuff up in your head. Like, why would anybody want to do these things and hurt all people? And so I'm very concerned, and I'm going to make, I'll be letting people know real soon what I'm going to do. There's just a few things, but I've already done one step, and that's I'm back in Minnesota. So the big news came out, the fake news came out and said, Mike can't run. He doesn't live in Minnesota anymore. Wrong. Here I'm back, and I'm here.
Okay, Mike Lindell is back. Well, he has since filed papers that he is running for governor. I assume that one check place that he needed to dot and check off was maybe a phone call to Donald Trump to see whether he could get his endorsement. Lindell will be a competitive candidate. A little kooky for my taste. He's got some baggage, but I can tell you no one was more out in front and more dedicated and hardworking after the 2020 stolen election than Mike Lindell. I had the pleasure of flying up to Missouri and attending his Truth seminar weekend, and I spoke on stage with Mr. Lindell, and I know his heart is in the right place, and I think he probably does care about his home state of Minnesota. Here's what President Trump has to say about the Somalis in Minnesota.
These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. When they come from hell and they complain and do nothing but, we don't want them in our country.
Well, I kind of share President Trump's, well, I don't kind of, I share President Trump's sentiment. If you're from a foreign country and you come here, I imagine that you come here because you like what you see and what you've heard. So if you don't like it, just pack your bags and leave. But you're not going to change the fabric of America. You do not have that right, even though we give you the liberty to speak. And I guess in a lot of cases in Minnesota, Somalis have the right to vote because they followed an immigration process, and we've allowed them to come in and we've allowed them to become citizens. Let me know what you think about that. If you're on Getter right now, you can react in the interactive chat. You can also put your comments in on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, X. Let me know what you think. I'm really interested in what our listeners believe should happen in Minnesota. And should we boot them all out? Should we start with Ilhan Omar, or whatever her name is, the congressman, the lunatic congresswoman from Minnesota? I think she should be the first to go because she is also proven to be corrupt. Didn't she marry her brother, Anthony, to get citizenship or something like that? Am I imagining that? Well, don't let me say if it's not true. Ilhan Omar, I think, did something crazy like that, but she's a lunatic. And all she does is bash the United States of America. Go back to Somali. You're free to leave. And frankly, I really wish that you would. Here's what some of the local politicians in Minneapolis had to say about President Trump's comments.
Twin Cities leaders fired back in defense of the Somali community, including the mayors of both Minneapolis and St. Paul. Nearly 80,000 Somali Americans called Minnesota home. One of them is Minneapolis City Council member Jamal Osman, who condemned Trump's comments.
Our community has lived through fear in the past, and we're not going to let us divide that. Our president is racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic, and we are going to fight that.
That's a lot of phobics. Racist, xenophobic, and Islamophobic. I just don't know. You know, when you're a guest in someone's house, you behave, you respect them. There's no respect that these people are showing. I mean, I would have felt so much better if Jamal had come on the news and said, I'm so grateful to be able to live in this wonderful country. You all are great hosts and you're very generous. In fact, of those 80,000 Somalis, a lot of people are being fed, housed, and clothed because of your generosity. But that's not good enough for them. They've got to denigrate and tear down and criticize the country that they came to as visitors. And we welcome them with open arms. Well, I think their time here and our generosity should come to a close because they don't appreciate our country. They don't appreciate and respect our choices, particularly with respect to religion. And call me racist, call me Islamophobic, call me whatever you want. I'm not directing this at a class of people. I'm directing it at Jamal and Ilhan Omar and Mike, what's his name? The governor. See, I've even forgotten his name. Mike Walsh, is that his name? Walsh, whatever. I mean, the things that he has done, putting tampon machines in boys' bathrooms. I mean, he's all about, you know, men and women's sports. What is the matter with him, Tim Walsh? Do you know how close we came to this lunatic becoming the vice president of the United States and then being a heartbeat away from the presidency? Can you imagine what a absolute disaster this country would be right now had Kamala Harris and Tim Walsh won? It's a scary thought. Well, I've been following Candace Owens a lot lately, and it's really hard for me to discern. I just don't know how much weight to put behind what she says. She's uncovered some really sketchy stuff about Turning Point and about foreign countries, namely Saudi Arabia and France, perhaps meddling in the United States, perhaps through innuendo at least. She's saying that they may have had involvement in Charlie's assassination. And Turning Point has just sat quietly on the sidelines and let her bash them. And it sounds like now they want to start exercising their freedom of speech and pushing back on her. But here's what Candace put out earlier this week.
Turning Point is going to commit to a live streamed event where they are apparently going to answer all of these lingering questions. And I would say these were pretty basic questions right out of the gate. Why they didn't do that right out of the gate, nobody knows. We can hear them, their explanation for why they didn't in just a moment, because they sent Blake Neff out. Blake Neff, by the way, is the producer of the Charlie Kirk Show. Now he is kind of the rotating talent of the Charlie Kirk Show. He was already featured with Charlie on the show, so that's not unusual. But I think we probably anticipated that Andrew Colvett, who is the TPUSA spokesperson, would have been the person to deliver this message. Maybe in theory, that should have been his job. Maybe he's traveling. The point is, we got Blake Neff, and I want to say, just to reiterate, that I have always maintained that whatever is going on at Turning Point USA, I have not felt that Blake Neff is one of the bad guys, okay? I just have never gotten that particular vibe from him.
So, I mean, Candace, a lot of what she's talking about is process. You know, oh, they gave us Blake Neff instead of the normal spokesperson for Turning Point, and she's, you know, seeing a ghost behind every shadow. I think she's gone a bit far, but I will say this. I don't know what happened on that fateful day, September the 10th, 2025, when Charlie Kirk was gunned down. I have no belief whatsoever. My belief that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk is less than 1%. I don't think he was trained as a marksman. I've watched two expert marksmen who were former Navy SEALs say that neither of them could have made that shot. And I've also seen demonstrations of what an AK rifle would do to someone that was hit in the head or in the chest with a bullet from an AK rifle, and it is very disturbing. And Charlie's wound was not traumatic from that standpoint. And if it were an AK rifle, what, an AK-15, AR-15? Is that what the weapon was, an AR-15? I'm not a big rifle guy. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm a shotgun guy. I've got 12 gauges, 20 gauges, 28 gauge. I've got duck guns and guns that you can shoot pheasant with. I've got a bow and arrow that I've hunted deer with. I love archery and I love hunting. I'm kind of cold on deer hunting now. I'll take a quick detour. We've got a little extra time today. I was in Montana and we stalked this mule deer for a couple of hours, and finally we came up on the mule deer. I got out of the vehicle really quietly. I got my bow and the trigger finger and paraphernalia on. It takes a little bit of doing. But I got equipped, and my friend had a rangefinder. And I knew that inside of 30 yards, I'm about 90% of being able to hit the bullseye or very close to it. If you get over 30 yards, my accuracy drops off a cliff. I mean, it really starts to degrade. And so as I was trying to get the strap tied around my wrist so that I could hold the bow and get the arrow in the bow and get set to pull it back. I'm left-handed, so if you're on the live stream, you can see me holding the bow with my left hand. I'm sorry. I would be holding it. Yeah. No, this was a few years ago. I haven't done archery in a while. I'd be holding the bow in my right hand and the arrow in my left because I'm left-eye dominant. So effectively, I would hold it backwards from a right-handed shooter. And I shoot left-handed too, by the way. So anyway, as I was getting in the prone position, my friend was saying 27, 28, 29. And that arrow struck that mule deer lung to lung. It was a perfect shot from 30 yards. And we were on a snow-covered hill in Montana, about a little earlier in the year than this. It would have been late October. But that deer turned around and looked me straight in the eye. Our eyes met, and the expression on his face was Why'd you do that to me? I haven't hurt you. I've not gone deer hunting since then. I'm sorry, I'm just a softie at 72. But it really was really painful to me when that deer and I made contact from that short a distance, and it was a beautiful creature. And so, but I have no mercy on duck, dove, quail, pheasant, partridge, you name it. If they've got wings, I'll shoot it and eat it, by the way. I always eat what I kill, and I enjoy the sport of it. Anyway, but I don't know rifles. I just don't know rifles. But these two Navy SEALs said they could not have made the shot that Tyler Robbins did. And he also said about 3 weeks ago, I am not the shooter, but I know who was, and it will all come out in time. Candace Owens has put out a lot of stuff about two Saudi planes coming to the United States in the days leading up to Charlie's assassination, and one of them at least landed in Salt Lake City and departed shortly after Charlie's assassination. There are a lot of other coincidences that Candace has come up with, but none of them, I don't think, are as compelling as Zach from Wolves and Finance has developed. And this guy is really good. If you want to see some good content, go look at Zach on Wolves and Finance. Zach DiGregorio. He's a CPA, and he has delved into Turning Point's tax returns. And as a public entity and a charitable organization, those returns and their financial information is in the public domain. You can actually go and look at what tax returns they filed. Well, there in that world, there are 501c3s, which basically are political action committees. They are the equivalent of a political action committee. They are tax-free, and they can engage in activities like educating voters and registering voters. And then there are 501c4s, which are strictly educational organizations, and they are not supposed to be able to interact with an organization from which they are helping. So in the political world, there is a brick wall between a C4 and a political campaign if the C4 is doing things that further the candidacy of whoever the campaign is. You cannot coordinate, you cannot have dialogue really relative to the campaign and the work that the C4 is doing. Anyhow, here's the point. Turning Point has Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action, Turning Point Faith. They also have a number of C4 organizations. Well, these 501c4s, according to Zach DiLegario, did not file tax returns for 3 years. And he put up on his podcast those facts. Well, this week, or actually at the end of last week, the Turning Point subsidiary 501c4s turned in their tax returns. And what we find if you go look at those is that 75 or 80% of the money, and we're talking about millions of dollars, somewhere between 2 and 3 million, but 75 and 80% of it went to the chief operating officer. Now that's sketchy as hell. And the money to fund those organizations came from Turning Point. In a month before Charlie was assassinated, he wrote a memorandum, and he said that there were unanswered questions about Turning Point's finances. Anthony, can you find that letter and insert it here for our viewers on the live stream? If you can do it in post-production, we won't be able to, well, unless you can find it and put it up in real time here. He's working on it. We'll see whether he's going to be back next week. We'll find out how good he is. I can tell you how good he is. Anthony is awesome. He is a pleasure to work with and does great work, but I do like to kid him around, tease him a little bit. But so Charlie wrote this letter and he raised questions about Turning Point's finances. He said he wanted a Doge type audit of Turning Point and its related organizations, and he terminated the chief operating officer of Turning Point USA. Now, Turning Point raises, it was $100 million a year operation. If you put all those organizations together, it may have even been over $100 million. I went to Turning Point galas at Mar-a-Lago and the Breakers, and I've never seen anything like it. One night they raised, and I think this was 3 years ago, they raised $22 million in 30 minutes. And Charlie was on stage and he would ask who would like to donate to help us fulfill our mission this year. And people all around the room would stand up and they would give him the microphone. And this guy would say, "My wife Gladys and I are so proud of the work you're doing, Charlie. And from the state of Tennessee, we're giving you $2 million. And then everybody would clap and go crazy. And then somebody would stand up and they'd say, "Well, we're from Texas. And in Texas, we go big. My wife, Maureen, and I are giving you $5 million, Charlie." And the room would just go crazy. And then after 30 minutes, they raised $23 million. I left that benefit and I told my wife, I said, they will never top that. We went back the next year and guess how much money they raised? $42 million. So you've heard me say I knew Charlie. We weren't best buddies, but we were very amiable towards one another. And I'd known Charlie. I knew Charlie for 8 years before his tragic death. We would talk once or twice a year. We'd cross paths or see each other. I did have a nice one-on-one with him about 9 or 10 months ago. Well, no, it would have been longer than that now. It would have been, let me stop and think. It would have been probably 15 months ago. A friend of mine invited me to his office, and the three of us met for an hour and a half. And I can just tell you that Charlie was the smartest person I've ever met. Of all the people I've known, and I'm talking about school teachers, professors, doctors, dentists, lawyers, Charlie was, without question, the smartest human being I've ever had the privilege of knowing. And I also never doubted his sincerity. He just came across to me as a very truthful person. Anthony's job is secure for another week. Since joining Turning Point USA in 2020, Justin Streff has led Turning Point's fundraising division, and in more than recent years has been involved in some organizational operations, filling the COO role in many ways, but now officially taking on the title and expanded responsibility. So this is where he is appointing a new COO. And what does it say there, Anthony, the rest of it? Justin will also closely coordinate with Andrew Seifer on the National Field Program. Where does he say? I know that he called for an audit, and yeah, scroll on up there so I can see it a little better. in his role, I have empowered Justin, among other things, to engage in an organizational-wide Doge effort. Justin will be assembling a small team to assist in this effort, which is focusing on Turning Point USA becoming more efficient, becoming more cost-effective, unifying organizational success around the company-wide metrics and goals, and reshaping the company culture. I expect many positive changes to come from this forthcoming initiative and Justin's expanded role. This letter proves nothing except that Charlie was not happy with the way things were being operated, and he did call for an extensive audit of the organization. The rumor on the street is that there was believed to be financial improprieties. So, do you connect those dots with his death? I don't think we're there yet. We are not able to say that there was a connection, but there's some sketchy stuff. There was some sketchy stuff going on at Turning Point. And the one of the things that Candace has really honed in on is Mikey McCoy. I don't know if you watched the service. His father is the pastor that eulogized Charlie, and I don't know. I shouldn't. I mean, it's not good to judge, but Pastor McCoy did not really light me up that day. I felt like his eulogy was almost more about him than it was about Charlie. And he said, Charlie told me I was America's pastor. And I told him, oh no, Charlie, I'm not America's pastor. But today you've proven me wrong, as he stood there and eulogized Charlie in front of millions of Americans and over 1 billion people worldwide. I don't know. It didn't sit well with me. Let me know if you think I'm being overly critical. You can tell me in the comments or on the chat, live chat, on Getter right now. But it just felt like, really? You're going to aggrandize yourself at this moment rather than Charlie? So then his son, Mikey, was Charlie's chief of staff. And I've seen the video. I've seen it played over and over and over again. Can we insert that in post also, Anthony? We'll grab the video. I'm sorry I didn't think to grab it before the broadcast today, but it wouldn't help our radio listeners. You'll have to watch the video version. But as the shot landed in Charlie, instantaneously, this guy, Mikey McCoy, who's standing 10 feet away, gets on the cell phone and exits stage right. And then we see him seconds later walking behind the banner and out towards the parking lot on his cell phone. Now, I'm sorry, that does not make sense to me. These two men were supposed to be like best friends. Now, what would you have done if you saw your best friend just be assassinated? I would do what a lot of other people did, and I would have immediately run to him and tried to help. I would have applied a compress on his chest. I would have helped, assisted in his breathing. I would have helped administer CPR. I would have done any number of things that I was trained to do in administering first aid many years ago when I took the course. But this guy didn't do anything. And he didn't run like I'm scared or duck like he thought he was going to get shot. It wasn't that kind of a retreat. It was like, okay, it's over. That's the way it comes across to Candace. And I've got to tell you, it raises a lot of questions in my mind. One issue is Pastor McCoy says that Mikey was on the phone to him saying, Charlie's just been shot. You got to get the word out and get all the pastors to pray for him. Isn't that nice? Would that be your first reaction? Then Mikey said he was on the phone to Charlie's wife. So the stories are not consistent. And, you know, the fact of the matter is you just never know what you would do in a situation of panic. And you don't know how you'd react. So maybe we need to cut Mikey some slack, but here is the unmistakable, undeniable fact. He was not panicked. He was as composed and as calm and looked like he was, I don't know what he was doing, but immediately on his cell phone. And he didn't dial any digits. You don't see him dialing the phone. You don't see him hitting a speed dial. You just see him pull the phone out and he's on it instantly talking to someone. And I don't know what they were talking about. But it does not pass the smell test for me. And I swear to goodness, I do not need another conspiracy rabbit hole to go down. But I'm not going to shy away from things that I've seen that just don't add up. And the impact on Charlie and the doctor that attended Charlie saying, oh, he was in such a wonderful physical condition and a physical specimen that he stopped the bullet. That's a bunch of baloney. An AR-15, I don't care. Iron Man wouldn't have stopped the bullet. And it would have done significant damage. Ergo, it wasn't an AR-15. If it wasn't an AR-15, it wasn't Tyler Robinson. And if it wasn't Tyler Robinson, then who the hell was it? Was it somebody inside Turning Point that has been caught red-handed, taking money illegally, unlawfully, stealing? Was it foreign interference? I don't know. Boy, I was on an interview a couple of weeks ago, and I said that my suspects would be someone from within Turning Point who had gotten caught with their hand in the candy jar, or it could be the deep state. Why would I say it's the deep state? Gordon, you just always go and talk about the deep state. You must have some sort of an obsession about the deep state. Well, I'll tell you why I talk about the deep state in this context. Because Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are lying to us. Because I don't believe for a second. I didn't believe it then, and the more I've learned, the less I believe it now that it would have been Tyler Robinson. How convenient. A lone gunman who breaks down the AR-15 within seconds, which everybody says that you couldn't do that quickly, jumps off the room, runs a few hundred yards, leaves the gun reassembled in the woods. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't comport with any degree of common sense or the laws of common sense or physics. You can't take the AR-15 apart that fast, jump off the roof, put it together that fast, and put it in the woods. Now, I'll tell you other things that are sketchy about it. There were searches on the doctor that attended to Charlie, and that hospital was not close to the campus. In fact, they passed a hospital with a trauma room in it, a very well-known trauma room, and went instead to this hospital that didn't even have an emergency room, I don't think. Maybe they had an emergency room, but it wasn't a trauma center. And this doctor that attended to Charlie, someone in Israel had searched days before the assassination. They also searched for the name of the judge in the case that's been appointed to the case. And they searched for the attorney that has been hired on to the case. It's just sketchy as hell. And that's why I think that our government could maybe possibly be involved, because who else could carry something like that off and cover it up? And that's what we're seeing. It's a cover up. Why are they covering it up? If it's not our government, is it Israel? why I said that on the radio, and this lady came through the phone line after me. She said, "There you go, blame the Jews." She asked me who my suspects were. So now she wants to call me anti-Semite because I said that Mossad could be involved because Netanyahu and Charlie were in communications in the early summer, and Charlie went to a fundraiser on Long Island where he was verbally assaulted by a leader of the Jewish community and a very prominent, wealthy Jew, and told Charlie that he had to tone it down. And then other people were telling Charlie that he couldn't have Tucker on the Turning Point convention. So Charlie was under a lot of pressure and a lot of heat. One donor withdrew $2 million of support for Turning Point. So this is not just, casual stuff here. It's serious stuff. I think you've got to put them on the list of possible, not even a suspect, okay? I think I wouldn't even say that they were a suspect. I think you've got to put it on the list of organizations and places that you would look. Just like you want to look at Saudi Arabia. They had these 2 jets that flew into the United States 4 and 5 days before the assassination. I guess these people were also Saudi military people, according to Candace, because they went to an Air Force base and conducted military operations with our military. And then one of the jets took off from the airport that was 30 minutes from the campus about an hour after the assassination attempt. So the airplane, the private jet, took off from Salt Lake City, or just outside of one of the feeder airports, maybe one of the satellite airports from Salt Lake City, and made a beeline back to Saudi Arabia, stopping in somewhere on the East Coast, I think Delaware, to refuel. But I think they came in from Delaware, and then maybe on the way out, they refueled somewhere else. So there's a lot of smoke. And Candace has been leading the fight. She and Charlie were legitimately good friends. The first time I met Charlie, I met Candace, who was with him. And that would have been in 2017 in Atlanta. A good friend of mine invited me to come and meet Charlie. And Candace was with him. I remember it vividly because they made such an incredible impression on me. And Candace is smart. She's smart as a whip and feisty, and I think very effective. I think she's also very brave. Okay, so Candace actually has claimed that a hit has been ordered on her. I'm just going to leave it at that. Go to YouTube. You can watch her there. She put those pieces up just Wednesday and Thursday of this week, and you can see what she has to say. I just don't, Anthony and I were talking about Candace before the broadcast, and as much as I like Candace, I think she's brilliant. I think she's communicative. I think she's full of, what do you call it? Vim and vigor. I can't say what I was going to say on the radio. But she's full of a lot of spunk, and I like it because I think she's telling us the truth. But what she doesn't ever do is connect the dots. She just puts out a lot of suspicious stuff, a lot of innuendo. And for me, she just never connects the dots and says, all right, here's what I believe happened. And I guess maybe I'm too quick to say what I believed happened sometimes before having effectively connected all the dots and really dug back into the next and next to the last and the last layer of the onion, which is really what a good journalist should do. But I let you know when it's conjecture on my part, when I say things that I lack evidence for. And here I lack evidence sufficient to point the finger at anyone. But there is so much sketchy stuff, my mind is open to considering anyone who acted or looked or behaved in a suspicious manner, like Mikey McCoy. I mean, that kid acted suspiciously. I can't come up with a good answer for it. But Turning Point is going to have a live stream. I guess it's coming up this week or next, this coming week or next. And they've invited Candace to come. And I doubt she will go. I don't know. You know, I think if she were to go, that they would absolutely have a verbal assault and ambush on her. It would be Candace against everybody else, and I don't know how that would work. She said she'll come virtually. She'd like to appear on a live stream. They've said so far, no, she's got to show up in person. I don't know how to sort all that out. But anyway, the Republicans held a seat in Congress this week. Matt Van Epps defeated his Mandami-like opponent, a socialist running on the Democratic ticket, for the seat vacated by Mark Green, who left the Congress to take advantage of a private opportunity. I've always wondered what that was. I'm going to look into see where Mark Green landed. He got out of the United States Congress to take advantage of a private opportunity. What you reckon that's about? Maybe some of our listeners in Tennessee, you know, we're on in Nashville each week. Maybe someone in Tennessee could send us a chat on Getter or leave a comment on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, or X, or comment on X Spaces, and tell us, why do you think Mark Green just got out of Congress? I mean, that's what puzzles me. I mean, these people, you have to work so hard to win a seat and spend a lot of your own money and a lot of political capital to earn a seat in Congress. And it just seemed like he was, I just wonder what the backstory is. No, I'm leaving. I'm going to join the private sector. We're going to have another seat after the first of the year. Marjorie Taylor Greene has announced her resignation from Congress effective January the 5th, 2026. Doesn't that sound like a long ways away to you? January the 5th? Well, it's less than a month. Can you believe that? With only 26 shopping days left until Christmas, 19 shopping days left until Christmas, I meant to say. And just 30 days before Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been such a fighter, has just said, I don't want to be primaried. She and President Trump are at odds now after having been so compatible for basically 8 years, at least 6 or 7. And she was a loyal supporter. But she didn't like the way that Trump was handling the Epstein files. And all the people that want to contest how the Epstein files were handled want to say it's out of sympathy and care for the victims. Here, you know, I just don't like things that when people say things that I don't think really tell the story. I mean, is it really sympathy and care for the victims that they're worried about? I mean, in my mind, yes, I'm very sympathetic for the victims. And I'm sorry that they had to experience the crimes that people committed against them. But, you know, Jeffrey Epstein's dead. I mean, isn't that a pretty good payback? Whether he committed suicide or was killed, I mean, retribution is one of the reasons, one of the outcomes for justice. I mean, it's part of our policy that there should be retribution against people who commit crimes against another person. You know, it's the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That's retribution. So is it retribution that they are after? Because Epstein is dead. I mean, is continuing to stir all this stuff up helping the victims, or is it keeping them in crisis? Or is it to punish the other offenders who we still do not really know the complete list, but we know Bill Clinton was one of the primary ones, and we put his picture with Epstein. We put his name on the airplane logs. What is going to happen? Why is nothing happening to Bill Clinton for the sexual assault that he committed against younger aged girls? But to me, the single most important thing, not the single most important thing, because I don't want to come off as cold or callous, and that's not the point. It's not who I am or where I am. But to me, what I really want to know, like right now, the main thing I want to know is whether our government had a role in the honeypots that Jeffrey Epstein created in Manhattan, Palm Beach, Florida, and Little St. John's Island in the Caribbean. That's what I want to know. Just like I want to know, did they have a role in Charlie Kirk's murder? Did they have a role in Building 7 crumbling down? We know they killed Kennedy. We suspect they killed Bobby Kennedy, and we think that they had a role in Martin Luther King's murder because a jury of 12 men and women said so in Tennessee in a civil trial that the King family brought. And we keep getting these indications of our own government participating in these atrocities, and I want it to stop. And I think it is the singularly most important thing that needs to come out of the Epstein files to date, and I think that's why we're not getting it. That's what I think. What do you think? Tell me. Tell me in the comments or in the interaction on Getter right now. Tell me you think I'm just a senile old man that's gone conspiratorial. I don't think so. Because there's so many facts and so much innuendo and the lies that we are continuing to get on all the above. That is what makes me so suspicious, more so than anything. It's the lies that they continue to tell us. And I'm sick of it. I think the federal government is rotten to its core, and I think the biggest rot is in the alphabet agencies. If we're going to solve it, it's going to be you and me. And I do my best every week to enlighten you and to educate you based on what I've read and what I've learned and what I know. I just share information that I've collected. But I want you to help. Write your congressman, write your representatives, write a letter to the editor of the paper. Call talk radio and let your voice be heard. We need a citizens' revolt in this country. The citizens of the United States need to stand up and say, we do not want a government that operates outside the margins, that violates the Constitution and the laws of this country for purposes that we just flat out do not understand. We just don't understand it. I can't reconcile it. Now, I got a good, strong feeling that Johnson killed Kennedy because Johnson was under investigation, and that he and Mac Wallace was Johnson's hitman. It is believed that he murdered as many as 8 people on Johnson's orders, people that were a threat to Lyndon Baines Johnson. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that's an explanation that makes sense to me of why they killed Kennedy. But I can't explain why they killed Bobby Kennedy. It could have been the mob, but I don't think the mob had the ability to kill Robert Kennedy in the way that we believe that he was killed. We believe that Sirhan was drugged or hypnotized. And I don't believe that Sirhan, I don't know whether he pulled a trigger. I don't think he killed Bobby Kennedy. I mean, every credible witness I've heard said that Bobby Kennedy was killed from behind Sirhan. Sirhan was standing in front of Kennedy. And after the event, Sirhan said, like, I'm waking up. I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't remember what you're talking about. And then Building 7, we're told that it came down because the foundation was weakened by the tumbling of the Twin Towers. There's not an architect or engineer in America who has watched Building 7 come down that doesn't conclude that it was a controlled demolition. So just don't lie. Tell us why Building 7 came tumbling down. We deserve to know. I want to know who fired the gun at Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania on July the 13th, 2024, and I watched it on television in real time. That's as close as I think I've ever come to a heart attack. I literally felt like the world came to a standstill for that minute, maybe 45 seconds that Donald Trump was on the ground. I sat there in disbelief and with the most overwhelming grief that you could imagine, firmly believing that they had killed Donald Trump. I've never been as relieved in my life as I was when he got up and said, fight, fight, fight. And that's what I'm trying to do right here today. I'm trying to fight in the only way I know how. And that is to study this stuff, look under the in the corner of the room under the rug, pull back the layers, and tell you what I found, and tell you what I suspect or what is plausible. But all the finger points, all the fingerprints on all of these things. Lest I forget, they found the bomber. The pipe bomber on Jan 6. A week ago, we were told that they had matched the gait of the pipe bomber and that it was a member of the Capitol Hill police. They even identified her. And then after that, after 5 years and after that, they have now tracked it down to a 30-year-old, a male in Virginia, that lives in a really nice house. And I don't know, we'll find out whether that's his parents' house or whether he lives there or what the story is. But I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. I don't know. I'm not saying anything at this point other than the fact that, why do I question the pipe bomb story? Well, let's start with the fact that they were deposited 16 hours before they were found. Now, do you wait 16 hours to set off a bomb? What were they waiting for? I just don't know. Who was the target? What was the point? It was at the RNC and the DNC. And the bombs were discovered late in the afternoon of January 6th. Some people have speculated that they think that it was going to be a diversion and it would divert people's attention away from the Capitol. I don't know. I've never understood the pipe bombs, and I still don't. Let me know in the comments what you think. Because I'm really stumped on what the purpose of the pipe bombs were. I don't know whether you watched this last weekend or not, but we were on live from Dallas, Texas, It was a inspirational day for me. It made me relive the assassination of John Kennedy. I talked to so many interesting people there. I talked to Judith Baker. I hope you saw her interview. She was Lee Harvey Oswald's mistress. I also talked to Ms. Hall, whose grandmother owned the rooming house that Oswald was living in just south of Dealey Plaza. And Ms. Hall was a very delightful lady. And we went in and we saw Oswald's room. It was not a room. It was a broom closet with a bed in it. But it had a lot of artifacts. It had his dog tags. It had his ID card from the Marines. And Mrs. Hall said that her grandmother said that Lee Oswald was a very kind, soft-spoken, gentle person. And that is also how Judith Very Baker described him, as just a sweet guy, and she was convinced that he didn't do it, just like I'm convinced that he didn't do it. The most compelling, there's so much compelling evidence. We talk about it all the time, about all the evidence. And I want to move on now from talking about the evidence about JFK's assassination, because I don't think there's any secret anymore. I'm convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that Kennedy, or that Johnson had Kennedy killed, that Allen Dulles carried it out. Dulles was at the war room of the CIA, where he wasn't supposed to be because he had been fired as director. But he was in the war room on Friday, November the 22nd, 1963. David Talbot documented that in The Devil's Triangle. And so is Roger Stone in The Men Who Killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ. And then Hoover just flat out covered it up. And they covered it up by killing Oswald. He is a casualty of the Kennedy assassination, not a villain, not even a trigger man, because there's so much evidence that they would never have been able to convict Oswald in a court of law. There is so much reasonable doubt. When he was arrested in the theater, he said, "I'm just a patsy." B, they immediately took him to the police headquarters and performed a paraffin test. No paraffin on Lee Harvey Oswald. C, two ladies who worked in the school book depository adjacent to the staircase that led up to the sniper's nest said that no one came up those stairs prior to the assassination. And that's very important, because Lee Harvey Oswald was seen, and two witnesses saw him in the break room 5 minutes and 10 minutes before the assassination, sipping on a Coca-Cola. And then 5 minutes after the assassination, the head of the school book depository and a Dallas police officer ran through the break room on their way up to the sniper's nest. And the cop said, "Who is that?" And the manager of the school book depository said, "He works here." It was Lee Harvey Oswald sipping the same Coca-Cola. And now we know that there were actually 4 bullets confirmed, because a Secret Service officer, all right, I'm doing what I said I wasn't going to do. I'm giving you more information. But all of that constitutes a lack of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. At a minimum, I think it is totally exculpatory myself. Anyway, here's the point I'm trying to get to. What are you and I going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? How do we effect change? I don't want to live in an immoral country. I don't want my money to go to support illegal, immoral acts. And people died in Building 7. And in the Pentagon, they can't find any aircraft remnants. We've got aircraft pieces even from the Malaysian jetliner that went down in the Pacific Ocean. But we can't find one piece of metal from the airliner that supposedly crashed into the Pentagon? It's just not the country I want to live in. You're the reason I want to live in this country. The flag is the reason I want to live here. The people who died for our freedoms are the reason that I want to live here. And the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But I feel like we were all collectively in the conspiracy to commit murder. If you see a crime and you do nothing about it, then that makes you culpable to some extent. So we all have a role in this. We are all complicit to a degree if we watch these things and say and do nothing. So we need a rebellion. We need a peaceful citizens' rebellion and revolt against the immoral, corrupt, rotten to its core federal government. I talked to someone today who works in a federal government. He's in a department of the federal government. He is a very highly placed person, and he shared with me the graft that they have uncovered in the last year and the corruption. And it's just blatant, it's indisputable, and it's sickening that as hard as you and I work to accumulate, to pay our bills, pay our taxes, and hopefully enough left over to save and invest, as hard as that is for people in the federal government, just to waste it and to spend the money on things that are immoral and illegal and just plain wrong. It's got to stop. We've got to stop it. We're the ones that have to stop it. So think, what can you do? Can you write a letter? Can you call talk radio? Can you reach out to your congressmen or senators? Can you write a letter to the editor? Can you talk to your friends and your fellow parishioners and your relatives and your neighbors? Yeah, you're going to get some blowback. You have some people that'll look at you with like a deer in headlights and ask you if you're feeling okay. Folks, it's worth it. I just got back from LA and I spent time with my 2 grandchildren. I want them to have the advantages and the opportunities that we have enjoyed in this country and really continue to enjoy. We do. It is the greatest country on earth. And in spite of all the bad things that we talk about, it is still the greatest country on earth. We need to keep it that way. And I just hope the Supreme Court will strike down the Voting Rights Act in January and that we can rebalance the power in this country and that the tail can stop wagging the dog. I want to see the Northeast changed so that while Republicans have 40% of the population, they have 0 representatives in Congress. And in California, where Republicans make up 40% of the vote, they have 17% of the representation in the state. Those things need to change, and we need to help change them. I think you can do that by we can start to do that by doing the things that I've encouraged you to do today. And today's broadcast is brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy, a restaurant services company in Atlanta. They serve hundreds of restaurants by helping sanitize the front of the house, the back of the house, collecting waste vegetable oil, and cleaning grease traps and vent hoods. If you're a restaurant owner or manager, check out PCRenergy.com. They're right there in Atlanta. Their phone number is on the website. You can call them up. They'll take your call. And they have live customer service representatives all throughout the day. Only the dark hours of the middle of the night are they unattended, but they give excellent customer service. Check them out, pcrenergy.com. Again, we're on the John Fredericks Radio Network and and cdm.press. We come to you on 24 AM and FM radio stations in 9 cities, from Nashville and Atlanta all the way up to Morgantown, West Virginia. We also live stream on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, X, and Getter. You can also catch us during the week on Spotify, iHeart Podcast, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and you can follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, Getter, and Truth Social. And all of our past broadcasts are on johngordon.tv. And as always, you can write me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. I read every one. I answer the emails, and I will listen to your input, especially your suggestions for future guests. Speaking of which, today we've got Cleta Mitchell and Humberto and David Cancio. They're authors, father and son combo. Cleta is one of the foremost elections integrity lawyers in the country. She's also a good friend of mine. We had a great conversation, and I'm excited to share that with you right now. And that's the truth. I'm John Gordon. Cleta Mitchell may be one of the smartest people I know. She was a state representative in Oklahoma. She was a champion of women's rights in the 80s and 90s. She was also a Democrat. But in the 90s, she saw the light, she switched parties, and now she works for the Conservative Partnership Institute, which is a conservative think tank headed by Jim DeMint and Mark Meadows. And I hope that she won't mind if I say she is also my friend. Cleta, welcome to The Truth. It's such an honor to have you.
Well, I am so thrilled to be here, John. Great to see you and great to know you're doing this.
Well, you and I go back a ways, and the thing that brought us together was the 2020 stolen election in Georgia.
Yep.
I am so sick of reading the company line that President Trump attempted to overturn an election without evidence. I think both of those statements, both of the parts of that sentence are wrong. Do you agree?
They're both wrong. They're both wrong. The media started using that term without evidence after Trump was elected in 2016. And so throughout his first term, there would be articles about something the president was saying or doing or a policy initiative, and the reporters in the quote news stories would say President Trump said without evidence blah blah blah. I had never seen that before. I'd never seen it, and now that it's just a constant, they insert that as a means of denigrating and undermining the legitimacy of everything President Trump says or does. Now, fortunately, the American people have seen the evidence, but
well, I've seen the evidence.
We've all seen
I
the
was
evidence.
Privileged to work with Bob Shealy on a lawsuit against the Fulton Board of Elections, Jeffords and Sotir versus the Fulton Board of Elections. I have seen the evidence. I've seen duplicate ballots on Brad Raffensperger's own website. We have 4 eyewitnesses, each testifying independently, that there was a pallet full of pristine
ballots,
absentee ballots, untouched by the human hand, and all scored identically, presumably by a printer. How much more?
For Biden.
I'm sorry?
For Biden.
For Biden, all filled out
Fulton
identically.
County.
But it doesn't even matter how they were scored, although you're right. It's material when you realize they were all for Biden. But the fact of the matter is, regardless of who they were marked for, they were illegal and they were fraudulent.
Right.
And so we do know that they were all marked for Biden. Now, Judge Brian Amaro ruled that Shealy and also Garland Favorito and his legal team demonstrated a prima facie case of fraud and ordered the absentee ballots be unsealed.
And produced to them.
Yeah,
And that was
allowed
back
to
in,
inspect.
was that 2021?
21. And that order, then courageous Amaro reversed himself and threw the plaintiffs or petitioners out on standing, which the Georgia Supreme Court correctly reversed unanimously and said Amaro's decision was initially correct. That order to inspect the absentee ballots still remains to this day, but we haven't gotten our day to inspect them. So what's going to happen now that the Justice Department has shown up on the Fulton County Courthouse doorsteps?
Well, let me step back and give you a little bit of background for your viewers and listeners. I was one of President Trump's volunteer lawyers in the post-election of 2020. I spent my career practicing political law, and that includes election law, campaign finance law, all of those things. I've represented a lot of candidates and organizations, conservative organizations. I used to say that my elevator speech was that I was the consigliere for the vast right-wing conspiracy because I represented conservative groups and candidates and that kind of thing. So when I was called the day after the November election in 2020 by Mark Meadows and asked to go to Atlanta to just see what was going on, and I got there and realized it was just a mess of an election. There were no controls in terms of chain of custody. Brad Raffensperger had illegally sent out to everybody on the active voter list applications for absentee ballots in the spring of 2020.
Well, worse than that, my wife and I both received absentee ballots, and we didn't fill out an application for absentee ballots. They just showed up in our mailbox.
Well, there were all kinds of things like that. And so we ended up filing an election contest pursuant to Georgia law that, in which we were able to demonstrate. It was a 64-page complaint filed in state court in Fulton County, which is required by the Georgia Constitution, because we sued Brad Raffensperger, and if you sue a constitutional officer in Georgia, it has to be filed in Fulton County. And that was filed on December 4th of 2020. Like I said, a 64-page complaint with over 1,100 pages of sworn affidavits, fact witnesses, expert witnesses, detailing all of the categories and specific illegal ballots that had been cast in Georgia in violation of Georgia law in different categories. I'll give you one example. Just in one category, and we had over 30 categories, in one category, according to U.S. Postal Service records, there were 18,325 ballots cast from properties that, according to the U.S. Postal Service, were vacant. Vacant properties, either a vacant house, there was no house, or a vacant lot. 18,325. The final margin, now mind you, there were 3 different recounts, and every time they came up with a different number. But the final certified number was 11,779.
Right.
So in that one category, you have more illegal votes than the margin. And under Georgia law, that means you can't certify the election. So you either have to have a new election, but here's the other thing. This is when federal law kicks in, and the Electoral Count Act has a process for contesting. If a state has not sent a certified set of electors and the election wasn't certified, then those can't be counted. That has to go to the House of Representatives. So, look, but we didn't get a judge appointed. We never got a judge appointed until we got notice of a judge being appointed. Now, this is supposed to be an expedited proceeding because it's an election, and it's a presidential election. We asked for expedited review. The statute requires expedited review. We got notice on January the 4th that an eligible judge had been appointed to hear the case and set the trial for the following Friday. Well, the following Friday was after everything was over. So on January 6th, what I was doing was we were in the process of dismissing the lawsuit, which we had to do, because Chris Carr and Brad Raffensperger were threatening to come after President Trump and all the lawyers for millions of dollars in legal fees, because Georgia has a fee-shifting statute. So if you bring a case and then you don't dismiss it when it's moot or whatever, then you can be liable for the attorney's fees and costs. And so that's what we were doing. We dismissed the case. And when people say, as the media has said, the left-wing media has said repeatedly, oh, President Trump filed all these lawsuits after 2020, he lost all the lawsuits. Well, he didn't lose our lawsuit. because we never got a day in court.
No, that's fake news.
It's fake news.
100%.
Fake news.
And they never talk about Shealy's case before Brian Amaro,
No.
who actually held evidentiary hearings.
Yes.
And after the end of that,
They were the first evidentiary
concluded
hearings.
that Shealy had demonstrated a prima facie case. So, Cleta, you know, it's really hard to listen to this.
Well, it is hard to
because
listen
this
to
is
this.
bigger than an election. It feels to me that there is real evil in our country. Well, before we get to that, let's back up for a second. You were on that famous call with Brad Raffensperger.
I was. And the media took from that. Look, here's what we were trying to do was to get, because we hadn't had a judge appointed. Now, mind you, this is on January the 2nd.
Right.
It's on a Saturday. It's on January 2nd. And we had not had a judge appointed. And the president wanted to try to see if there was a way to get Raffensperger, which we've been trying behind the scenes to do for weeks, to sit down, because he just kept saying publicly when asked about the case that we had filed, he kept saying, well, their data is wrong. Your data is wrong. So we had said, and we said on that call, if you bring your data and show us where we're wrong, we'll bring our data and show you where you're wrong. And if you're right, we'll tell everybody.
Yes.
But if you're right, we'll tell everyone. But if you're wrong and we're right, you need to do something. And so when the president was saying we just have to find 12,000 votes, we didn't have to find any. We'd already found them, just like I was saying. 18,325 vacant properties, 1,100 people voting who are registered at post office boxes. That is illegal under
20,000 pristine ballots.
20,000 pristine ballots.
I mean, it just goes,
it goes
on
and on. And, you know, so the media says that he was trying to tell Raffensperger, go find votes. No,
he was demonstrating what the thin margin of error was.
Right.
I think you'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to have understood the point that President Trump was trying to make. But they've contorted it. They've twisted it into something that he was not implying or asking for. And they keep saying that he was trying to overturn an election. I've never heard him say that. Have you? Did you hear him say that? He just said a timeout. There's a lot of smoke. Let's get to the facts and find out whether this was an honest, free election. That's my perspective. Do you disagree?
I think it's absolutely the case. And every state has a process for filing an election contest. I don't know about all the cases that were filed elsewhere, but I do know that for the most part, they were all dismissed on procedural grounds. They never got to having 100%. An evidentiary hearing. Exactly. In our case, we dismissed it after the election. The Georgia electors had been certified because there was no remedy now for us. So we dismissed it. The case was moot. But we never got into court. We never got to present our evidence. And there was a lawyer from Las Vegas named Robert Barnes who came out and spent a little time with us. And I talked to him a couple of years ago, so this would have been 2 years after we worked together in Georgia after the 2020 election. He said, Cleta, there's a reason they didn't appoint a judge. You had the goods. Mm-hmm. They could not afford for those facts and evidence and witnesses to ever see the light of day. So they just ran out the clock. And I honestly had never thought about it like that, but that's exactly what they did.
Well, it all makes sense when you frame it in that perspective. Here's the thing there are two things that really bother me about this. First of all, who are they?
Yeah.
And you know, we've got an election that was stolen. The franchise, in my view, is the pillar of our republic. You destroy the franchise, we have no republic.
That's right.
And that, to me, seems to be the effect of what they were really driving at.
Well, one of the things...
That means, I just don't think it was these guys, Kemp, Raffensperger, and Carr in a back room making these decisions. We know Kemp goes to Davos every year. We know that China is at war with the United States. It's a stealth war, in the words of General Robert Spalding. There's so many people that are attacking our country right now in real time in front of our very eyes. So I'm really concerned about that. The second thing that really bothers me is that Donald Trump, who was the best president of the United States in his first term, which he is now surpassing in his second term, and that's not a partisan statement, that's just a statement of fact. I mean, you look at all, what criteria do you want to use? He was the best. Same here, same now, and it's only getting better. But there were 18 other people in Georgia whose lives they destroyed.
Well, there are 54
or tried
people.
to.
There are 54 people in 5 states who are still under indictment.
Yes. Including your colleague, Mark Meadows, who was a great...
including the president.
Chief of staff and of Patriot. And
they're all patriots.
And then look at Rudy Giuliani. They made him give up his family heirlooms to pay Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, who we saw on video taking the same stacks of 100 ballots and feeding them through the tabulators multiple times. One 32 times.
They testified in the deposition that Bob Cheeley took of them, that they had, he made them go back through and he'd say, okay, that was one time. Yes. Well, yes, we couldn't tell. Do you know whether those ballots were counted? Well, it kept jamming. You know, so he kept asking them, okay, that was the second time. Okay, and you did 9 times. They testified that they had run those ballots through 9 times. And
yet tabulator 6 shows a lady who had no jams. Not one.
Right. Well,
all her ballots went through.
Here's the thing. You ask who they is.
Who are they?
Well, look. I mean, I've come to believe that there is an elite in this country which is very much one world focused. They don't want borders. They hate the United States, and they represent 1% of the population. But it just happens that they control everything. They control the media, they control the Democratic Party, they control academia, they control Hollywood. What were the 2 things that they made impossible to discuss after 2020? 2 topics. That there was a massive silencing censorship regime. Mm-hmm. We couldn't talk about COVID. You couldn't talk about anything related to COVID, the origins of COVID, the shot, the threats of the shot, the recommendations, the policy decisions, and you couldn't talk about the 2020 election. You were not allowed to discuss the election. Now, why is that? How do you have a situation where you are not allowed to talk about the election? And so one of the things that happened was Dominion sued Fox News for billions of dollars.
Do you think they ever paid the judgment?
Do I think Fox News paid it? Well, I'm told that they did. I don't know that, but they sued Newsmax, they sued One America News. Now, why did they do that? They didn't want anyone to talk about or look at the voting systems, the voting machines. And now, as we learn, there's no voting system in America that has all U.S.-made parts.
Right.
The parts are made in China. And they say, oh, they're not connected to the internet. Open it up. Let us see.
Well, that's flagrantly false, because in Coffee County, Georgia, they had a problem with the Dominion machine. The technician showed up and he repaired it from the parking lot. Right. He never went inside the building.
Right.
How do you do that if it's not? It doesn't have a connection?
So there have been so many lies. But I will say this, John, one of the things I have been trying for decades since I left the Democratic Party, I've been trying to explain to conservatives and to Republicans, you all worry about the substantive issues, taxes, education, pro-life, foreign affairs, regulatory policy. The left focuses on process. The process issues. What are the campaign finance laws? What are the election laws? What are the laws that govern, who can run, who can vote? They write all of those laws. Our side pays little attention to those. And I found PowerPoints that I had given, 10 years ago, talking about Obama and his intent in his second term to change the way we elect people to change our political system. All these left-wing groups came together in January of 2013 and said, we're going to change the American political system. I have the article. I put it into a PowerPoint that I presented in 2014, in December of 2013. Wow. I presented this. And they have, the left, the Capital Research Center estimates that between about 2011 and 2020 that these left-wing billionaires and foundations had given between 11 and 14 billion dollars to change election policy and election procedures. And it took 2020 before anybody on our side started thinking, hey, maybe we need to look at this. And so one of the things that I did, well, you know, the left came after me after the phone call, and I ended up resigning from my big law firm partnership in January of 2021 and joined the Conservative Partnership Institute as the senior legal fellow. And from that, then I founded the Election Integrity Network, which is a network of state coalitions all over the country, where we have 28 states now that have state election integrity coalitions. I'm telling you what, these citizens, they are amazing. They have spent tens of thousands of hours over the last 4 years, and they know exactly what's wrong with the election process. They know how dirty the voter rolls are. They know what's going on with the election technology. Everything from e-poll books is really a threat. So there are lots of things
and that pesky little QR code, I am so suspicious of that.
Well, you should be.
We don't need a QR code to count ballots.
Judge Totenberg ruled that violated the Georgia Constitution, but then after 7 years, she decided suddenly that the plaintiffs didn't have standing to bring the case. So
sounds like deja vu all over again.
I know. Well, I figured out the standing laws in America. Standing is whether you have the right to be there before the judge and in the court in the first place. And I figured out the standing rules in America are as follows for civil procedure. If you're a Democrat candidate or left-wing group or the Democratic Party, you have standing. If you're a conservative or Republican, you don't have standing. That's the simple way to explain it.
Right. The new interpretation of what that means. Well, so Kemp and Corin Raffensperger.
Oh, gosh.
You know, Raffensperger ran for the state legislature in Georgia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've got a lot of friends that are in the Georgia House of Representatives. I've had 3 or 4 of them tell me that he was perhaps the most conservative member of the Georgia House of Representatives.
I just have a hard time believing that.
What happened to Brad Raffensperger?
The AJ...
Just like Brian Amaro. We had a good judge. He was on our side. He was making rulings, and then he just flipped. I mean, there must be something. My guess, without evidence, is that it is very subversive, that some evil force is truly at work in our country.
I've said that. I do think that's right.
I can come up with no other intellectual argument to make.
The left, Mark Elias and all these guys, they attack me regularly and have for 4 years because of my work in election integrity. So what I finally said is, okay, if you're not for election integrity, then you must be for corrupt elections. And you're right, John. One of the things that I say about why the election system is so important to us and our country is because of what the Declaration of Independence says. The Declaration of Independence says governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And the way we as Americans give consent to those governing us and withdraw our consent is through elections. If you take away our ability to do that, which I would argue has happened in a number of states in this country, if you change the rules so that no matter what they do, they being the powers that be, we saw what they did during the 4 years of the Biden regime, I really think, and they did so much damage to our country in such a short period of time. And I think that they thought that they could control the election process so that we could not throw them out. And we came so close to losing our country, but fortunately, Donald Trump said, I'm not going to let them have the last word. And notwithstanding the fact that he has suffered mightily, his family has suffered mightily, both personally and financially. As I mentioned, 54 people indicted criminally in 5 states for being Trump electors, Trump lawyers, or Trump supporters, campaign workers. And I believe that we will find that I already know that these state Democrat AGs in 4 states, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, and Michigan, these Democrat AGs acted at the behest of the Biden Justice Department to bring indictments against people in their state for having been Trump electors and supporters. Fani Willis, the now disgraced Fani Willis, we know that she and Nathan Wade, her lover, were at the White House before they brought, and I think we will find that happened in each of those states. So I believe the president has the authority and the constitutional responsibility to pardon every single one of those people because they were acting as agents and proxies for the federal government. And the electors, those are not state positions. Those are constitutional positions created under the U.S. Constitution. And they were acting to fulfill federal constitutional responsibilities. And these state charges, they just had to come up with things. They couldn't. The Nevada Attorney General, Democrat Attorney General Aaron Ford, made public statements in May and September of 2023 that there were no state laws under which to prosecute the Nevada Trump electors. And then he reverses himself in December of 2023 and charges them criminally.
That's more of the same.
It's more of the same.
That's what we're talking about. So I got a pitch from my publicist yesterday talking about father and son who have co-authored a novel. And actually, my understanding is they intend to do, I don't know what you call when you're going to write 7 books. It's a lot of writing. That's what you call it. But welcome, David and Humberto Cancio. David has spent his career as an attorney, and David is an entrepreneur and growing a business. So David and Humberto, welcome to The Truth. El gusto es mío.
Gusto bien recibido.
Gracias.
Thank you so much for having me. Very much.
It's a pleasure. So tell us about the book. And well, first tell us about how you decided to write a book together. I think that's so cool. I've got 3 adult sons, and my eldest is an author. He has written 5 or 6 screenplays, and I have to tell you, they're very compelling, I think. And one of them was turned into a short film that had modest success, but it's a tough business to get established in. But he's working it, and his wife is writes screenplays, and they live in LA, and her career is doing quite well. So anyway, I'm just saying, I think it sounds like a lot of fun, probably not all rainbows and butterflies, but very gratifying to end up with a successful book. So tell us about the book, what inspired you to do it. And I'd like to learn about the process too. So let's first talk about the book itself.
Yeah, David and I were living in different states. I was in Miami practicing law, and David was working in the Raleigh area in North Carolina. So what happened was that he and I decided that we wanted to do a project to spend time together. And so I said to him, let's write something. I used to write little children's stories when they were kids. And I said, let's write something together. And of course, I came up with the wonderful idea of reimagining the Tall Tales. And he said, let me think about that. 2 or 3 days later, he comes back and he goes, Dad, I really don't want to reimagine the Tall Tales. But what about that case that you did? And that question launched us on writing the series. It turns out that the first book we wrote actually is the 3rd book in the series. But it was too long to be a first book. So we went back and did 2 prequels, which are actually Volume 1 and Volume 2, which will be coming out shortly.
That's amazing. So the first book is not out yet?
No, the first book is out.
The first book is out.
That's Gabriel Lock, Bound by Law, which came out last September. So that was the first book in chronological sequence. The one that you were saying first book might be referring to what is now the third book, but that hasn't come out yet. That'll come out in April of 2027.
Right.
Wow. So how do you all collaborate?
Oof. Well,
it was a bit rocky at the beginning.
yeah, it's
that father-son thing can be tricky.
Yeah, death threats were involved and so forth.
It wasn't that bad.
But it's worth working on.
It's interesting because let me just put you in my perspective for a second. So not only do I have to have creative arguments with my dad, which, there's a natural hierarchy when it's your father, but then on top of that, your dad's a lawyer and a good one. So your argument for changing something has to be so sound and so airtight that if you don't have reason beyond, any kind of improvable doubt, you got no shot. So I would say that it was a unique process. No, if I had to break it down, so just to give you an idea, the first 3 books have all had a different process. 1 and 2 are more similar, but book 3 was truly different compared to 1 and 2. The way that it works is that, he's the lawyer, he's lived everything. So what happens is that when we decide that we're going to put out a novel, we look at his career and we look at what cases he had, right? I've never had these cases. Some of these cases were well before I was even born. So what happens is that we sit down and he's got the cases. We'll put them down kind of on a list of more or less what they're about. And then after I figure out what the cases are like, we go through a selection process of, I think this would fit really well. This might fit really well. Maybe this is better in the next book. But it's all based around the theme with what the novel's supposed to be. So the first one is Gabriel Lock, Bound by Law. And what we really show people is what it's like to actually be in your first years of practice.
I can tell you what it's like. It's a living hell. Anyway, I digress.
You're trying to figure out who you're going to be as a lawyer. You're trying to figure out who you're going to be as a man because you're a young guy. And you're trying to put all these things together and get the work out at the same time and learn everything that you don't know.
Yeah, which is a lot.
So Gabriel has to navigate these waters. And in order to make it more interesting, we set the novel in 1981 Miami.
That's the first one.
So they all take place basically in the 80s.
Yeah. So the last book will take place in 1991. It's 10 years of Gabriel, but it's basically the 80s, right? And so the way that we work together is he writes down a rough outline of the case, then he writes what happened in the case. Then my job is to read it, act as a devil's advocate, really check through every single piece of whatever we've decided. Then after that, he will go ahead and check those answers or check those questions. Then we'll write. Either he'll have written the actual story, and then I'll come in and I'll add what I think is more human. Because the problem is that sometimes when you're a lawyer, you enter lawyer mode and you think facts. But we know that when you're writing a drama, there has to be more of a human element. So to a degree, my dad really writes the skeleton and I fill in the flesh.
So with these books, I hate, a little reluctant to ask the question, but are they a little John Grisham-esque?
Yeah, so we've been told, and this was given to us by a manager, actually at the Barnes and Noble in Wellington. Her name is Kay. When she read it, she actually just immediately started stocking it on the shelves, whether she was supposed to or not. And she titled it, she gave it a shelf talker, which is, this kind of just slip of paper that tells you what the book is about. And she's the one that coined the term John Grisham meets Miami Vice.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Well, I mean, if you could be half as successful as him, we could move this meeting to an island and have some drinks with little umbrellas in them. Well, I'm beyond excited to learn more. I can't wait to get the book and to read it. I wish I'd been able to do so before we had the interview. Both of you have had what I would consider extraordinary lives. I'll start with Humberto, since he and I are the same age. You were born in Cuba and immigrated to the U.S. at the age of 6, I'm told. And at 12, you moved to Spain, where you attended the American School of Madrid for 6 years. You were a world traveler at a young age. So I would suspect that those experiences have shaped you as who you are today. And then you came back to the United States. You went to a great school, Duke, and then Florida for your JD, and then practiced for 40 years in Miami. I would think that by now you've about seen and heard it all.
Well, not all. You'd be surprised. The progressives surprise me every day. So I learn something from them, new thing from them every day.
You got the cliff notes on the truth. We skew a little conservative, you might say. So what kind of law did you practice?
My first 20 years, I did a lot of family law. And then the last 25, I've done basically commercial and real estate law.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you were a lawyer when Miami was just right at the beginning of the boom cycle. And so you must have seen a lot of interesting and probably not so interesting things happen.
You know, I tell people that because of legal ethics and things, everything in the book has changed. In other words, no client is real. Cases are put together between 2 or 3 cases that I handled. They're all inspired by cases I handled, but you can't reveal. The only thing you can reveal is if there was, for instance, a trial. Then you can do that because it's public.
In the public domain.
You know, public knowledge. But everything else needs to be very, very changed. The one thing we didn't change was Miami.
Right.
So Miami and what was going on in Miami comes right through the book. It deals with who the clients are, how they think. It deals with how the attorneys think. And so you get a double open door. You get an open door to the legal system, and you get an open door to what it was for all these cultures to collide. In the 80s, you had 4 civil wars going on in Central America. You had uprisings in Colombia, Peru, Venezuela, Argentina, and Uruguay. And a lot of the people that were threatened or kidnapped at some point ended up in Miami. So it made for an incredible culture clash. And then banks started coming down to Miami from north. And so you had all these northern folk coming down from New England and New York. All of this was happening during all of the 80s. And then, of course, you had the contribution of the Miami Vice sector. But really, the story isn't about the Miami Vice sector. It always intersects with our stories. But the story is really about the people that built Miami.
Oh.
And the story is really about how they navigated through the problems and the cases with the help of Gabriel and his dad.
Yeah.
Because Gabriel practices civil law with his dad. So it's a father-son duo.
Which, of course, everyone asks me, you know, what happened to you when I tell them I'm not a lawyer, but these things happen.
I think you've done just fine. You went to NC State and majored in Spanish. I bet I could tell you where you could have found a good tutor. You also speak French fluently, Portuguese, German, and Italian. You like soccer, traveling, and music, reading. You've got quite a breadth of interest and experiences in your own right.
Thank you.
So I can imagine that if you can combine those with your pop, that you all could fashion a real interesting novel. You know, Miami has always been a place of some fascination for me. I traveled there in 1967 with my parents, and my dad served in World War II, and some of his best friends in life were people that he served in the Army with. So we went there and we visited a friend of his in Coral Gables, Johnny and Mary Lou Smith. I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but I can remember Johnny and Mary Lou Smith from 1967. And we spent 2 or 3 days in Coral Gables, and it was a lovely place, and it just had a warmth, and the architecture was so special. Then you had downtown Miami, which was sort of a forbidden area from what I could tell. I mean, nobody went to downtown Miami. But then South Beach, I've watched over the years, and it was vibrant, and then it was in decline, and then it was vibrant, and it seems like now it's sort of taken a little notch down because Brickell has come alive, which is on the perimeter of downtown, and it is the most fascinating, fun place that I've ever seen. It is so cosmopolitan. They've got restaurants, shopping, and nightlife, and also it is a business center. And how many billions did they spend to create that place?
Well, it's funny because as you're mentioning these things, so for us in particular, Coral Gables, um, Coral Gables is probably the I guess most well-known place in Miami to locals. Everybody knows Coral Gables. If you say Coral Gables to a local in Miami, they're going to know it. And Coral Gables, was really where you probably had the most money that was really that part of that founding of Miami. And Coral Gables is a huge part to play in our series. I don't want to give anything away, but at one point, a certain character may actually end up living in Coral Gables.
Oh.
But we try to really demonstrate in the book and really throughout the series just how Miami changes. You see South Beach, you see what happens, with the river and the drugs that come in later, because even though it's not the focus of the story, it's the backdrop. And so what you're getting in the Gabriel Lock series is you're actually getting an anthology of what happened in a major city through the lens of this attorney and his practice. But in addition to that, you're also getting a bit of an inside scope as to what's, kind of what's going on today. One of my favorite things that I've heard is Miami turned into Florida and Florida turned into the United States. And it kind of makes me laugh a little bit.
That's a great line.
It is. It's a phenomenal line. But so you see how all these changes happened in Miami. You see how the attorneys, really deal with their clientele, and you see how the city's, constantly growing. For example, we have a particular client in the book whose name is Santiago, and Santiago has, this huge enterprise of businesses, if you will. And it's really about how he sees how the city's changing, what business he wants to put forward, how he consults with Gabriel's father, Thomas, because, a client of Santiago's magnitude probably isn't going to go to Gabriel, who's this kind of newer lawyer. It's going to go to the more seasoned attorney, which is his father. But you also see it through the eyes of his client, Walter Buendia, who has a trucking business, right? And they're looking at all the things that have to change. So it's interesting how you get this real view of how the city's changing and how beautiful it is and what's coming in through the eyes of this attorney.
But it's all in the backdrop. In other words, it's all in the background. That's not the story. The story are the cases. The story is the drama in the cases. I got tired of watching lawyer shows and of reading books where the lawyer becomes the most important thing and the guy's either a drunk, a womanizer, or some other trope. And that isn't most lawyers. Most lawyers are good guys or good women, And so I wanted to make people understand that the real drama is in the clients and what they're going through, not the lawyer. The lawyer just helps them through it. And does the lawyer change? Does the lawyer suffer? You bet. I went through 20 years of doing family law, at which point I said, you know what? No más, no more. I'm going to do something else. Because if you're not Teflon, No, seriously, in family law, if you're not made of Teflon, eventually it gets to you.
I would think you'd be part shrink, part lawyer. And,
Yeah, actually.
I tell my kids that life is really not that hard, I don't think. You live by the 10 Commandments, and you eliminate the drama from your life.
Yep.
And then everything sort of falls into place. That's my paradigm. But back to Miami, I remember that the Jackie Gleason show used to come from Miami every Saturday night, I think. Da, 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 da. I can remember that theme song so vividly. And there was a glitz and a glamour and something very special about Miami, which I actually think still exists there. My wife and I travel down there about once a month because we both like to go and eat good food. And as many good restaurants as there are in West Palm Beach, there's none of them that we really are dying to go back to. But Miami, to me, is like New York 40 years ago. It is really on the up and coming, and so many incredible good places to go eat. This has nothing to do about anything, but I'm going to tell it anyway. After Miami, we drove up to Fort Lauderdale, and we went to dinner at the top of Pier 66 the month that it opened. And Pier 66 was one of about 5 or 6 dining rooms in America that had a revolving restaurant on the top, which is where we ate. And we were joined there by this guy named Mike Morgan, who again was another one of my dad's Army buddies. Well, I was only 14, and but my parents had drugged me with them all around the country, and I got to have some really nice experiences. My brother was 5 years older. I was almost like an only child, and I was my mom and dad's little pet. They just dragged me with them. But the attention that we got in this restaurant was just unbelievable. I mean, they fawned over us like we were royalty. And I just couldn't assimilate it. It was fun. I enjoyed it, but I couldn't put it together. So we got back to our hotel room that night, and I said, Dad, that was a great dinner. I loved it. But what was that all about? And he said, well, I don't know, but let's open the paper in the morning. Well, Mike Morgan was a columnist for the Miami Herald, and the next morning on the living section, front page was Pier 66 opens to grand acclaim. And I was there, just like Forrest Gump, And that was a very memorable night. They've just renovated and redone Pier 66. And Helen and I went down there last Saturday night. And like Thomas Wolfe says, you can never go home again. It just wasn't the same. No Mike Morgan, no fawning, and the food was just okay. So anyway, I digress. So what was it like, David, to be in Miami in the 80s? Did you know about Miami Vice? Were you on the periphery? Maybe you were right in the middle of it. I don't think so with 4 wonderful children. But what was your experience?
No, the question would be for my father, I think, Humberto, because I wasn't even a seedling in his mind in the 80s.
Yeah, you were just a kid. You missed that.
I hadn't even been born yet. I was born in 1991.
Humberto, what was it like? Were you aware of the things that were going on? You probably heard about them through your family practice.
No, you couldn't avoid being aware of them. I mean, in 1979, there was actually a shootout in the middle of Dadeland Mall between 2 rival gangs, Colombian gangs. So it was almost impossible not to be aware. The problem was very complex. In the last 4 years, we've got an influx of 4% of the population into the United States. In other words, with all the people that came through, the population in the United States increased by 4%. In 1980, Miami had 2.5 million, 3 million people. And within 60 days, it got an influx of 125,000 people from Cuba with the Mariel boat lift.
Oh, my gosh.
That is the equivalent to 4%.
Oh, wow.
So Miami went through the experience of the equivalent of the southern border in 1980. Then on top of that, we got the influx from all those countries that I mentioned before. I have a client who they moved the whole family because one of the brothers got kidnapped in El Salvador when they were having their civil war. And you knew that if you paid the ransom, they were going to they were going to kidnap the next brother and the next brother and the next brother. So when they kidnapped the first one, as they were paying the ransom, they were putting people on the plane and moving to Miami. So these kinds of things were going on then, like they're going on now.
Yes.
The drug problem, like they have through the southern border, it was Miami. All of these things. So Miami was a microcosm of what's happening in the United States now. And that's why we decided, in great part, to place the adventure, the books, in Miami of the 1980s, because it makes it current to today. All the problems that the clients go through makes it current through today. Yes, people would. There was people being conned, for instance, without revealing too much. People would go, listen, I've got a couple of bags of grass, and when I mean bags, I mean big black trash can bags of grass that I need to put somewhere. Would you hold it overnight? I'll pay you $5,000. Hold it overnight in your store.
And this is $5,000 in the 80s, not today.
You're right.
Yeah.
So they pay $5,000 overnight. The guy would keep them, give it to them in the morning, and get paid. Great, $5,000 coming in for your business at that point. The guy would. People didn't take it too seriously at the beginning. Then they come to you 3 or 4 weeks later and say, listen, we have another overnight. This time it's a little more.
Yeah, 2 bags of grass.
So we'll pay you $7,000 instead of $10,000. And so they'd pay him. The guy would keep it, but by morning it would be gone. So then they would show up and say, "Oh, no. We had $80,000 of grass in there. You owe us that money now." And until the people that were going through hard times, we have to remember we were in the middle of a very strong recession. Sometimes fell for that. And so not only was there the drugs, but the drugs brought a lot of people who were not people you would take home for dinner. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot going on all at the same time. The influx of all that population forced the city of Miami to go out and hire an enormous number of police officers. And so they couldn't be picky. And so then you had all the corruption that followed, the river cops and all of that. The situation got really complicated, and it was a fascinating time to be alive and be in Miami.
No kidding. That's a fascinating recount. So you immigrated here yourself from Cuba in 1959.
Yep.
You were 9 years old. I was immigrating from Ohio to Georgia at the same time, but I suspect your experience was a little different than mine. Do you have remembrances of living in Cuba as a youngster?
I do.
What was life like there?
Very slow paced, very pleasant. But then, the Civil War came along and the communists took over.
Was your dad affluent?
My dad was actually a military officer by career.
Oh, wow.
My dad actually studied.
So he had choices to make.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Life or death choices.
My dad was 2 things. First, in 57, 58, he was at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island for a year.
I'll be darned.
And so he studied there. And then in 59, he was at the Organization of American States as a part of the Cuban delegation. But he was a career military officer, and the first thing that Castro's regime did was to put him in jail. So they tried him for treason, and Fortunately, he hadn't been in Cuba, so it was very difficult for them to make up something. And thanks to that, and thanks to the fact that he was a fairly popular officer, he got off. He was one of a handful of people that actually walked out of those kangaroo courts. Everybody else mostly ended up in jail for 20 years or were shot summarily.
Oh my gosh.
And so the moment he left, they started looking for him. My mother was 9 months pregnant. I remember climbing up the stairs. They had him at the Morro Castle, which sits at the, it's an old Spanish castle, fortress actually, that sits at the entrance of Havana Bay. So they had him up there, and I remember as a 6-year-old climbing those stairs, and the stairs, I could hardly climb them because, you know, they were huge. So I remember going to see him, and while he was, you know, being tried. And that was very possibly the last time I was going to see him, because if they declared you guilty, they'd take you out right away. No appeal, no, they'd take you out and boom, you're gone. So he managed to survive. And when he was let out, a week later, my little sister was born. And 7 days after that, he was on the run. You know, there's a lot of interesting stories while he was on the run, but needless to say, he managed to escape with some false papers on a merchant ship.
What about you and your mom and sister?
My mom, my sister, and I, well, they didn't know that he was out of Cuba, because remember, he goes away with false papers, and they didn't have complete control like they do now.
Mm-hmm. They were probably disorganized. Plus, they were a news regime.
Yeah. So it took them a while to control like they do now. So we just got on a plane and left out of Havana airport, landed in Miami, and that was in September of 1959.
Unbelievable. What a story. So I went to the second grade with a gal that was from Cuba. Her dad was a dentist, just as nice as could be. I wonder where she is today. But that is such an incredible story. Not too many people have that life experience. Were you anxious as a 6-year-old knowing that your dad was on trial and that you could possibly never see him again?
You know, as a 6-year-old, you don't realize really what's going on. You know, I know that I went to see him in jail, but it didn't click that they were actually going to take him out and kill him. That part was not explained to me, really.
David makes our lives seem kind of dull, doesn't it?
I don't know if dull would be the word for it. I'm just grateful that I didn't have to live through those times.
Yeah, and grateful to your dad that he did, so that you could enjoy a wonderful life in the best country in the history of mankind.
Oh, don't even get me started on when I hear people complain about the United States. I mean, if you know, back in the day, you could knock somebody in the head and, you know, they wouldn't call the police if they realized they were wrong. Problem is that people don't realize they're wrong anymore and they call the police aneway. So there's only so much you can do.
I heard somebody say the other day that it may have been Elon Musk who said if the next time you think you're getting broken into, or you have a legal or a crisis, a law enforcement crisis on your hands, somebody stealing your car or whatever, just call your nearest crackhead and get them to come help you out. Don't call the police because you want to defund them and you don't like them. Well, listen, thank you guys. I really did enjoy our time together. So let's just recount. The Gabriel Lock is out, or is about to be released. Is that right? No, it's out.
It's out. So this book is out. Book 2 is coming out in a little over 2 weeks.
And what is the title of book 2?
That is Bound by Fate. So it's Bound by Law and then Bound by Fate.
Yeah, it's Gabriel Lock, Bound by Law, and then Gabriel Lock, Bound by Fate.
Fantastic. Well, I will look forward to seeing that. I hope that I can come to your book party in North Palm Beach, you told me.
North Palm Beach, yeah.
In just a couple of weeks. I would love to attend if I can. and I will make every effort to do so. And then I'll just help you get more filthy rich by buying a couple of books from you.
I appreciate that.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, from your mouth to God's ears.
So how's the book doing?
It's doing pretty well. We've sold 5 times what the average author sells with their first ever book. We actually won an award called the Four Seasons Award. We were the second grand prize winners of that.
Oh, wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Newsmax wrote an article about us in March of this year randomly. Our publisher didn't even send anything to Newsmax. They found the book and wrote an article, and they said, these guys are rising bestsellers. Watch out for their novels, which was amazing. You know, you put out your first novel, you're running around trying to figure out how all of this works, and somebody from Newsmax National, not even local, decides to write that. So that's been incredible. And then actually perhaps the biggest thing that we can be grateful for, at least that's materialized at this point, is,
well, now wait a second, David. You're just appearing on the truth. Don't marginalize or trivialize us now. I mean, this is going to be the gasoline that's poured on the fire that's going to cause your career to blow up.
Going back to some of the reviews, which I'm sure you've seen, you know, they talk about Gabriel's faith and morals and how, you know, he's a stand-up guy, and the whole thing is very wholesome. And last week we got a call from Campbell Law School from the associate dean. And this was in response to inviting my father and I to come give a talk in November of next year. They'd like to, I'm sorry, in the fall of next year, they'd really like us to speak about not only just the novel, but actually, you know, having those morals and ethics, because everything that her students are bombarded with are people that are doing unethical and immoral things in the practice of law. And she read the novel and she said, what this does is show lawyers who they have to be. And she said, I'll be considering making this assigned reading for anyone that wants to come to Campbell. You know, talk about an amazing thing that somebody says, hey, your book is the best thing that I can give to younger people who aspire to this profession. And
well, that is a great endorsement. That is a fabulous testament. You know, Humberto and I probably started our legal careers at about the same time, and I don't know about you, Humberto, but my impression was that at that point in time, being a lawyer was still a gentleman's profession, and we largely self-regulated, and we were disciplined, and we really did pay attention to and believe in the canons of ethics. Seems like an era gone by. Maybe your book can help us get back there. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego. Y el gusto es mío.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Till the next time we meet.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the signing.
We'll see you at the signing.
And that is The Truth. And I'm John Gordon, coming to you every Saturday on the John Fredericks Media Network in 8 cities on 23 AM and FM radio stations. We're all across the web, YouTube Live, Rumble, and Getter, and X, and Twitter. No, the one I always forget, Anthony. I got to get on that more. The Facebook Live and Instagram. That's the one I always leave out. I got to get into the new millennium. I'll try and do my best. We also come to you on all the social or on all the podcast stations, Spotify, iHeart Podcast, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music. Please come and subscribe if you would. It means a lot to us. It costs you nothing. And the time it takes is less than the time I just told you. So if you like us, if you do, and we'll be right back with more of The Truth.